So let's open up to Revelation chapter 20, and this evening we'll be looking at a new teaching that has developed, at least it seems to be new. I've never heard it, maybe before the past year or so, but I'm hearing more and more about it lately. And the name of this doctrine, it's called Satan's Little Season. And it's based off of Revelation chapter 20, verse 3, how the devil will be loosed from his prison for a little season. Who has ever heard of this teaching known as Satan's Little Season? Anybody? Okay, maybe one. All right. So, Satan's Little Season, like I said, the title comes from the King James Version, Revelation chapter 20, verse 3. It mentions that after the millennium, so after the 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth, after the millennium, where Satan is bound in the bottomless pit during that time, after the 1,000 years, Revelation 20, verse 3 says that Satan must be loosed for a little season. So that's where you get the term Satan's Little Season. So the basic premise of this theory is that the millennial reign of Christ, where Jesus ruled and reigned on the earth for 1,000 years, they say that has already happened, and that the history of it has been erased. So that we are currently living in this time period directly after the millennium, or maybe 100 or 200 years after the millennium. We are currently living in this time period known as Satan's Little Season, where the devil has gone out and deceived the whole world, and the devil has convinced the world that Jesus never even ruled and reigned. And he's sort of tricked everybody into thinking that this is a future event. Now that sounds wild. It sounds, your heads are probably exploding, some of you, after hearing that. But yeah, it's the basic premise that the millennial reign of Jesus already took place.
I just want to get on here to say why I'm even on TikTok. The reason that I'm here is for Christians that were like me a few months ago before I even heard about the little season. And then when I heard about it, suddenly everything started to make a lot more sense, you know? It answered basically all of the questions that I had had in the past about how much influence Satan has on our culture. You know, I used to think Satan is the god of this world. That's why things are the way they are. And to a certain extent, that's true. But it suddenly put everything into place when I heard that there's a possibility Satan could be out to deceive the nations, that's part of what is in Revelation. And it really pieced together all of seeing like the old world buildings and the melted buildings and obviously the other conspiracy theories that you hear about that end up being true. It suddenly just makes sense, and it actually sits so much better with me in my soul too, knowing that Jesus meant what he said when he said he was coming soon, that he did return soon after. And the fact that he, you know, I go back and I read these verses, and it's so clear to me that he was intending to return within their generation, and the disciples knew this. All the people that he was talking to knew of his imminent return. It was something that is more, it's so much more clear when I go back and read it now with the lens that this could have happened, and he could have reigned on earth, and we could be in a season of deception. I think it just answers so many questions of mine, and I've just been feeling like there are people that need to know about this. There are people that need to know that there's a time in history in the Bible that Satan will go out to deceive the nations. And that's quite literally all I'm doing here. I just want to say, this is a possibility. You can disagree with me. In fact, most people are going to initially disagree with it because it's basically saying that, you've been lied to about Christ's return. You've been lied to about the Bible, where we are. And it takes a lot of humility for someone to honestly, be able to approach the topic and be okay with being wrong. I think it is the ultimate humility test for people.
Now, this is a general timeline that I'm going with here. And I'm not really big on charts, but, a lot of people really like the visuals. And I put a lot of work. I will not be covering a few things today. I will not be covering why I believe the year 70 AD is so important to understanding. A lot of people, there's this big push to say Revelation was written in the 90s. And it's to jar you, to detach you from the fact that I believe all of Scripture was written by 70 AD, and that it was all fulfilled. And in my research, I have shown that the Greek LXX is the more accurate timeline. In fact, all the New Testament writers were quoting from the Greek LXX. The Masoretic is the Hebrew Masoretic is the youngest text we have. The Greek LXX is 1,000 years older than the Hebrew Masoretic. I don't have time to go into all that, and you can research that for yourself. So, according to the Greek LXX timeline and all the books that are the extra biblical books that are associated with it, Yahushua HaMashiach arrived in the year 5,500. Now, according to Hebrew Masoretic, he arrived in the year 4,000. So you have a 1,500-year discrepancy right there. That's a huge problem. He arrived in the year 5,500, and according to all this timeline, the millennial kingdom of Yahushua HaMashiach came upon the earth physically, not spiritually, physically upon this earth in the year 500 AD. Now, what's interesting about this is that 500 AD is when Rome fell. And this is when we learned that the Dark Ages came upon the earth from 500 to 1500. That's Orwellian language right there. The Dark Ages were really the Light Ages. All right, so it was not primitive, it was not barbaric. It was a time, I believe, that the millennial kingdom was on the earth and the saints were ruling with Yahushua HaMashiach. In the year 1500 is right when we get into, Christopher Columbus, 1492. We get the fall of the Knights Templar. We get all these things happening, and we go into the age of enlightenment, which is the age of awakening to the divine within. And this is an age of rebellion, and you see it in the art and the architecture and all these kind of things. Rebellion against the kingdom. And finally, we get to what we call Satan's little season. Now, this comes with Revelation 20. I'll go over this really quickly. So a lot of people ask, people ask me, so Noel, you think the end times have already happened? I'm like, well, technically, we are in the end times. We're just really, 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 really far in the end times, much further than anyone speculated previously. And so a lot of people are wondering if the year 1776, July 4th, 1776 is the date of Satan's release from prison. And again, a lot of people will say, well, what prophecy is left? Well, I will encourage you. The menorah, of course, has 7 lights on it. And the last one is a representative of the 8th great day. The 8th great day has not been fulfilled yet. And I will encourage everyone to do a Bible study on all the references to the 8th great day. I will start you out on one, I'll give you one breadcrumb for your trail, and that is circumcision. All right? Circumcision happens on the 8th day. What is associated with circumcision? The resurrection. All right? Circumcision of the heart. There is still a lot we're looking forward to. All right, right here you see a Mont Saint Michel. If someone put a gun to my head, I could not pronounce a single French word correctly. But that was one of the greatest experiences of my life going out there. In fact, if you are a J.R.R. Tolkien fan, he used that as inspiration for Middle-earth. Interesting thing, it's just a surreal experience going there. Now, one of the things about this is that they will tell you that they built this specifically as a monument to the actual location that Michael conquered Satan and threw him into the abyss. What was the battle over? the battle was over Great Britain. The battle started on Great Britain. They went across the sea, and it ended right there. That's the spot. And so here we see Revelation 20:1-3. For those of you who need caught up to what I'm advocating, it says, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand." And I would assume, at least according to this, it's talking about Michael. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little time. Now, I will point out that the 1,000 years come to an end. That doesn't mean Satan is released right at the end of the 1,000 years. It's after that. There could be any number of years before he's released again. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. For those of you who love the Twilight Zone like I do, I'm not going to even give context to that. You had to have been there. That's my favorite TV show of all time. But we see a chart of the short season, and this is the population of the world over the last 12,000 years, and you see that there's, according to the official narrative, there's hardly any population growth, and all of a sudden, 1800, and boom, it shoots up, and we've got billions and billions of people in the world. And that's telling you that there was some catastrophic events a couple hundred years ago. A lot of people died, and then we have, very few people are left on the earth. We have a huge, huge influx of population. Cabbage Patch Babies, this is fun. Over there on the right, you see that the first film, this is, of course, debated by historians, but the first film ever made, a silent film in the 1800s, happened to be about the Cabbage Patch Babies. So think about this. The first film ever made was about harvesting babies, all right, and handing them off to people. And there's something very esoteric about why they come out of cabbage patches, the Cabbage Patch Babies. And I put a couple of scripture verses here. We see one from Jasher, and this is actually I didn't have room to put the whole chapter in here. So I'll just read this little passage here. "And the babes of the children of Yasharel were upon the earth like the herb of the field." This is the context. This is when Moses is born and Pharaoh's trying to kill them all. Let me just see here. And when all the Mitzrayim saw this thing, the Egyptians, they went forth, each to his field with his yoke of oxen and plowshare, and they plowed it up as one plows the earth at seed time. And when they plowed, they were unable to hurt the infants of the children of Yasharel. So the people increased exceedingly. Basically, the story is that the children of Israel are basically like they're living in the herbs in the fields and like in the dirt, and the Egyptians are trying to plow them up to kill them, and the angels are protecting them. It's pretty crazy. And then we found this other passage here in the book of the Nazarene. And it actually says that when Yahushua HaMashiach resurrected, Yosef's garden, it was a cabbage patch. I found that really awesome. There's something connected with like Cabbage Patch Babies and the resurrection. And this will lead into my next point. Actually, this is just, I'm not even going to explain this. Some of you will get this, some of you won't. In the 1800s, after the mud flood, we have this phenomenon called the orphan trains. And this actually went into the 1900s. A lot of people, they say, we freed the slaves in the 1860s, whatever. Actually, slavery went on a lot longer than that. And it's almost like if you ever saw the original George Lucas Star Wars movie where the two droids are taken by the Jawas and they're all lined up and the farmers go out and you kind of slap the thigh and check the teeth and be like, I'll take these two right here. That's actually what they did. They had millions of children without parents. Huge influx of children. We don't know where they came from. And they are being taken to Australia. They're taken through Russia. They're taken through Ellis Island and put on trains and hauled out west. And they're repopulating the earth with all these children. We don't know where they came from. And so, again, we have all these photos and documentation of just factories and coal mines and all these places where nothing but children were taken in there to work. And it's like, where were all the adults? Why did they need so many children to work their jobs? And, one of the stunning things, too, is that many people will look at when they study their genealogies, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue that they actually came from the orphan trains, their ancestors. Speaking of trains, one of our big theories is that the train routes, we are told they were built in the late 1800s, when in fact they were way, way before that. And it is my conclusion that the American West already had trains going all the way out to California at a very early time. And I think one of the theories I put forward for this is, you can see in Leviticus 23 there, and it talks about the wave sheaf offering. And a lot of these train routes, you can see there, they all lead to these huge palaces and capitol buildings, cathedrals, and I think that they were leading the people to the different priests so that they can give their offerings. Also, I'll point out that let's see, you see things like the Donner Party. That was a fake story put forward by the Freemasons and the Jesuits in the newspapers. And the whole lesson is you keep to the trail, don't go off, because they didn't want them finding these places. They didn't want to find the railroads, the roads, the cities. You keep to the trail, or else you're going to end up eating each other. That was the moral of the lesson. Now, this is another interesting phenomena that we see all through history. And you could, again, test this out for yourself. How can I explain this as simply as possible? It appears as though there was a count in AD that went up to the 700s, so 4, 5, 6, 700, and then it stopped. And then suddenly, for whatever reason, our controllers decided to add 1,000 years, and we go from the 700s to the 1700s, to the 1800s. And one of the ways you can look at this for yourself, you can test this out, and you can look at old coins, maps. You're going to see a lot of these apparent ones, and they're actually eyes. The I is for Jesus, the year of Jesus, 592, 602. The big giveaway is there in Boston. I love that one because you see the year of Jesus, 734. Now, a lot of people will say, no, that's just a Roman numeral 1. Could be. It could be. But then you're going to see a lot of the big giveaways is when they put an X for Christos, or my favorite is J for Jesus. And you'll see like a J, 643 or something like that. You're like, okay, well, there it is right there. Now, some of you, especially if you've been in the Flat Earth Awakening for some time, you're going to know about the Urbano Monte map. In fact, I think it was Rob Skiba who actually made it popular. It's a phenomenal map that I would ask all of you just to spend a day of your life just absorbing every little detail in there. It is an amazing map. And it gives away a lot of stuff. So over here we see the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. And this is what I would propose may very well be Millennial Kingdom architecture. It means it was here a long time ago, and this was a part of the World Fairs. I don't have time to go over the World Fairs, where they were hauling millions and millions and millions of people on horse and buggy days back when they had a farm to harvest. And they were successful in pushing them out into these World Fairs, which I believe are these really old Millennial Kingdom cities. And they would put on psychodramatic episodes, like they would assassinate a president at one, or they would have a serial killer show up at another, or they would, take people to Chicago and burn it down in front of them. And so what's interesting about the Urbano Monte map is that the Bay Area of San Francisco was not officially founded until 1776. It was not named the city of San Francisco until 1845. They were preparing for the Gold Rush hoax. That's right. It was James Marshall and Sutter actually never found gold. They made the whole thing up. And but they needed a reason to get people out there. And but right there, you can see this Urbano Monte map was dated 1587. I put a red there for the I because it's really 587. But you can see right there, clear as day, San Francisco. It's a city in 1587. How does that work with the official narrative? How in the world did the map maker in 1587 know that San Francisco would be discovered 200 years later and built up in the Bay Area? So here's another huge clue to the puzzle. And these are melted cities all over the earth. There appeared to have been a point in history when there was a cataclysmic judgment on humanity, on the cities, and we just see melted cities. We see it all over from the Grand Canyon up through the Colorado Rockies, up to Salt Lake City, just melted cities. In fact, the Native Americans have stories about that. And we see it all through the Middle East, particularly in Turkey. I see a lot. They're everywhere. And I put 2 Peter in here because you all know the passage. And he talks about how in the past, Yah judged with water. Well, he has changed now, and his new agenda is to burn with fire. And he says that Sodom and Gomorrah were those mile markers. From now on, he's judging with fire. Well, then I ask you, when did this happen? Because I believe this happened after 2 Peter was written. There was a worldwide judgment event. We see melted cities everywhere. Over there you see Petra, melted city. I mean, you see some of these like leaning over, and I mean, just there's so many photos I could take you through on that. Hey, I think I'm doing good on time. Still not going to make it through, but I'm doing pretty good. I'll cover this really quickly. Any Californians here? Anybody? Yeah? A few Californians? You probably heard about California being an island at one time. We have tons of maps, and all showing that California was an island. And in fact, here on the left, they kind of show that California, like the Catalina Islands, would have originally been the mainland. Some cataclysmic event happened in rather recent history that sunk California into the ocean. And not only that, the land rose because there was you see the residue of it, like with the Salton Sea, and in fact maybe even the Great Lakes in Salt Lake City. That might have been beachfront property back then. Now going back to the burned cities, I've done a lot of contrast and comparison between the melted cities and these grand cities like London, or here we have Rome, right? And what I showed was in this passage in Luke, when he's sending out the 70 and he's saying to them what they're commanded to do. And he says, those who reject the message of the kingdom, it says, the kingdom, he says, it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city. So the basic idea is that when the kingdom came in, the people who had rejected the message, those places were toast. But the places that embraced it, I think that they flourished as cities. And of course, where was Paul writing to? I know everyone says, well, that's the Vatican with the Roman Catholic Church. Well, where was Paul writing to? We know that the church was flourishing in Rome. They embraced the message of the gospel, and I believe they were rewarded for it. Another big one is Britain. By all accounts, Britain was the first fully converted to Mashiach place on the earth, and I believe they were greatly rewarded for it. Actually, I believe my conclusions are that the United Kingdom was ground zero for the Millennial Kingdom. And I don't have time to go into the planting of Israel there. However, we can see on a very esoteric level. I mean, they're telling us the lion and the unicorn. We all know that the lion is the Lion of Judah. This is the Yahudim reconnecting with their brother Manasseh and Ephraim again. So what did I put for... I put these down like 2 months ago, so what did I write? This comes from Deuteronomy 33:17. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of a unicorn. Okay, so this is identifying Ephraim and Manasseh with the unicorn. And then we see in Revelation 5:5, and one of the elders said unto me, weep and not behold the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah. Okay, so we have that established there, that those are the two tribes. And the idea is that Yehudah was ruling, I believe, from the throne in Great Britain. We all know who that is, Yahushua HaMashiach. And then the Stone of Scone comes into that, and fun stuff. And here, once again, you see the Tav on the flag of Great Britain. You actually see it everywhere, the mark. And we see here in Isaiah 11:12, and he shall set up an ensign for the nations. I think that's it right there. And shall assemble the outcasts of Yasharel and gather together the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. So everyone's asking, when is the second Exodus? Sorry to break the news, but I actually think it happened, and this was the ensign. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Yehudah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Yehudah. That's important. Ephraim shall not envy Yehudah, and Ephraim shall not vex Ephraim. I think that's a prophecy for the Millennial Kingdom.
So we asked Chat GPT about this, and here is the question we asked it. Fringe or esoteric offshoots who believe the 1,000-year reign has already happened and we're now in Satan's short season. If you were Satan and wanted to pull this off, how would you have manipulated time to do so? Here's the response we got. ChatGPT said, Oof. You're really cracking open the vault here. Love it. And so Chat GPT continues on to say the following. So let's play this out. If I were Satan and I wanted to convince the world that the 1,000-year reign of Christ already happened, that the final judgment is coming soon, and yet no one has a clue because I've manipulated time and history, here's how I'd orchestrate it like a cosmic con artist. Step 1. Scramble the calendar. Insert phantom centuries. Add fake years. So people think that we're in the year 2025, but we're actually much further along. Or I think in this case, we're actually a lot further back in time. Use calendar reforms as cover stories for the shift, switching the Julian and the Gregorian calendars. Most people barely notice or understand these changes. Hijack early church record keeping, rewrite saints' timelines, emperors, popes, mix myth with reality. And I just want to say they have certainly done that. So this one is definitely true. Effect. People lose the ability to track prophetic timelines accurately. The 1,000-year reign could have ended millennia ago, and no one would know. Step 2. Erase and recycle history. Burn ancient libraries. Hello, Library of Alexandria. Create just enough preserved documents to form a shaky narrative. Inject confusion by overlapping historical events, wars, empires, leaders, etc. And again, I don't know about you, but this sounds like the truth to me. Duplicate or echo stories. Example, Nimrod becomes Alexander, becomes Napoleon, becomes Hitler. To reinforce the illusion of a linear, progressing history. Bingo. I mean, that is exactly what they've done. And the effect of this is that people think we're still awaiting Jesus Christ's millennial reign to happen, not realizing it's already happened, and we're living in the epilogue, and as Chat GPT says, quote, my season. Does that mean Chat GPT is the devil? Step 3. Water down scripture interpretation, push futurist eschatology through influential theologians, so everyone thinks Revelation is yet to happen. Again, this is exactly what's happening. It's speaking the truth. Discredit preterist or historicist views by labeling them heretical, fringe, or irrelevant. Translate the Bible in ways that obscure timeline markers. Twisting, for example, this generation shall not pass. And again, they have really done this. ChatGPT is telling the truth. And the effect of this is the church, as ChatGPT calls it, my former enemy, becomes confused and divided about what time it even is. And again, this is exactly what's happening. So you can't say that AI is just making stuff up. It's telling the truth. Step 4. Create a culture of distraction. Flood the world with noise, media, tech, entertainment, endless news cycles so no one questions the deep stuff. Build a society where truth is subjective and history is just a matter of perspective. Ridicule anyone who questions the timeline. Label them conspiracy theorists. Again, This is happening right now. And the effect of this is that even if someone stumbles close to the truth, they're socially neutralized. I can attest to that from personal experience. Endgame, Satan's little season. Case closed. So here's what Chat GPT says is the real goal. Buy time. In Revelation, I get a short season after the millennium. To stretch that out, I confuse time itself, discredit prophecy, and shift focus from eternal truth to material survival. Meanwhile, I gather my armies, Revelation 28, distract the church, and prepare for a final stand, knowing full well it ends badly for me. Now, after hearing all that, do you think that Chat GPT is lying or just telling us what's really been going on? I had a good friend of mine who is very well versed in AI, and he uses Chat GPT all the time for work. I had him ask both Google AI and DeepSeek about this subject. Same question. If you were Satan and you were trying to cover up evidence that the millennial reign already happened, how would you do it? And the responses are pretty much the same as in the last segment. And I just find this very fascinating that no matter which AI tool you use, you're getting the same information, and it sounds like exactly what's really happening in the world right now. So let's take a look here. I'm going to start reading these. I need to add one important note. The friend that I had ask AI this question doesn't know anything about this conspiracy. I've never really explained it to them. They're not even a conspiracy theorist at heart. So the fact that this was the information that it spit back out, I mean, you can't even argue that AI was reading his mind because he doesn't even know what this conspiracy is all about in the first place. Okay, now I'm going to read the information that my friend had received from these chatbots when he asked it the question about the millennial reign already happening. He used DeepSeek AI and Google AI to do this. And here's what it said. Okay, let's explore this hypothetical scenario based on the fringe theological premise you've described. If one were to operate within that specified belief system that the 1,000-year reign described in Revelation 20 has already happened and we are now in Satan's short season, and imagine being the entity, quote, Satan, aiming to conceal the millennial period, the manipulation wouldn't necessarily be about literal time travel as we think of it in science fiction. Instead, it would likely focus on manipulating perception, memory, and historical records. No surprise there. Here's how such an entity within this theological framework might hypothetically attempt to achieve this. 1. Mass amnesia, memory alteration. A supernatural event could be conceived that wiped or distorted the collective memory of humanity regarding the events of the supposed 1,000-year reign. People would simply not remember that golden age of peace. False memories could be implanted, suggesting a continuous history of conflict, struggle, and slow progress, effectively overwriting the period of the millennium. Now let me just say, that is exactly what happened, and all you have to do is look back at the story that they tried to tell us about how long we struggled and people were on horseback and living in log cabins, and then boom, one day all of a sudden we had televisions and cars and cell phones. I mean, their story does not make sense but this makes 100% sense. Number 2, destruction and fabrication of historical records. A concerted effort, perhaps using natural disasters, wars, fires, or direct supernatural intervention, could have been made to destroy nearly all physical evidence, texts, artifacts, and records from the millennial period. Simultaneously, a new fabricated historical narrative and corresponding, though perhaps sparse or fragmented, evidence could have been created or seeded to fill the gap, suggesting events like the Dark Ages, plagues, or continuous warfare occurred when the millennium supposedly was. The goal would be to make the current timeline seem like the only timeline. Again, that is exactly what I believe happened. But let's continue. Number 3, distortion of time perception and historical interpretation. Rather than changing time itself, the entity could manipulate humanity's understanding of history and prophecy. This would involve promoting theological interpretations that spiritualize the millennium, claiming it was never a literal earthly reign, and argue that it happened subtly within the church age, which is Augustine's view, though not usually framed this way by fringe groups. Misdirect focus onto future prophetic events, making people overlook the possibility that a key event is already past. Sound familiar, everyone? Accelerating societal change, chaos, and information overload during the, quote, short season could make the distant past seem even more remote, obscure, and irrelevant, making it harder to question the established historical narrative. 100% agree with that. Number 4, obscuring lingering evidence. If any remnants or echoes of the millennial period remained, example, unexplained ruins, genetic markers of longevity, lingering spiritual knowledge. Sound familiar to everyone? The entity would work to discredit, destroy, or provide mundane explanations for them. This could involve promoting skepticism, materialism, or alternative pseudo-histories. Number 5, creating a counterfeit reality. The short season itself would be presented not as a brief period of final deception after a golden age, but as the culmination of all prior human history, or simply the way things have always been. The very nature of current global conflicts, moral decay, and spiritual confusion would be framed as the norm rather than a specific limited time anomaly following a period of peace. In essence, within this specified fringe belief system, the hypothetical, quote, Satan wouldn't need a time machine. The manipulation would be centered on information control, erasing the memory and evidence of the true past, aka the millennium, and constructing a convincing, albeit false, historical narrative that leads seamlessly into the perceived chaos of the, quote, short season, making humanity believe this present darkness is the natural progression of history, rather than only a temporary state after a forgotten utopia. Amen. That's all I can say, is that this is spot on. This is exactly what I believe and many others believe was the way this all went down. They made us think that this is all just the way life is and we just need to deal with it. It's crucial to remember this is exploring the internal logic of a specific non-mainstream theological interpretation and a hypothetical scenario derived from it. Mainstream Christian eschatology generally interprets the millennium as either a future literal event, a symbolic representation of the current church age, or holds other diverse views, none of which typically involve a past forgotten millennium, followed by the current era being Satan's short season in this manner. I cannot believe how spot on this chatbot is, because before I even read this, I already knew this to be true. I can feel it in my soul. The evidence that I've seen points to this. I mean, this is the truth. And for anyone that's watching this who's just questioning why I am so sure that this is the truth, look at these images. We don't know who or how these buildings were made, even to this day. And to recreate something like this would take incredible amount of resources, money, and time, knowledge that we don't even have. All of these old buildings were like memorials to Jesus with a crown on his head, surrounded by saints with glowing halos. That tells me that whoever built these buildings were very fond of Jesus Christ. They believed that he ruled the earth on a throne, and there were all these saints around him. All you need to do is listen to the people who have had near-death experiences and were able to see the heavenly kingdom and return to talk about it, as well as people who have had visions from God in which they are shown heaven. These buildings you are seeing on your screen look almost exactly like what these people have described seeing in heaven, although not quite as breathtaking, obviously, since these were created on earth. But still, the resemblance is uncanny. So just look at the evidence that's right in front of our face. Don't believe what you've been taught. They've taught nothing but lies. We have to use our own God-given discernment and look at what's right in front of us and then decide what we believe, not what we were taught growing up at school.
Hagiographies. Now, from what I can understand, these hagiographies are basically accounts of people being in their glorified bodies, saints riding on chariots of light, going to the north before they knew the 1,000 years were going to end of Jesus's reign, and they knew they had to get out. And towards the end of all this, that's where it was. They started talking about how they were going to move all these people and all the saints up north to the camp of the saints. And basically, they do mention the north, and they do mention the black rock at the center of the earth. So all this stuff to me has been verified and is true now. And everything lines up so much with what we've been speculating on up to this point. That's all we could kind of do. So these are all texts talking about the 1,000-year reign of Christ that's already happened. And I believe if you show this to your Bible experts, they would say this is all kind of like fiction and heresy. But in our eyes, this is all verification that Jesus did reign for 1,000 years. The tribulation, lots of destruction happened, and they've all hidden this from us so that Satan could deceive the nations. So anyway, that's about, I'm going to read some of these because just to get some of y'all interested in somebody that's more qualified to do some really good research on here. But basically his introduction just says hagiography derived from the Greek, and it encompasses the vast body of literature concerning Christian saints. It's a comprehensive guide, compiles publicly accessible digital resources for hagiographic research, focusing exclusively on collections available online without institutional access barriers. So these are all hidden, like from the Vatican, and it's pretty hard to find. It's amazing that he found all of these. Adam, the one that discovered this or put it together, he says that this is just barely the surface. Like, he's still got a lot more text to uncover and compile for us. So anyway, let's read just a couple of these. I'll let y'all go, but this is fascinating. Has got my mind blown. God is good all the time. So let's just read some of these. Now, all these do have resources and they're sourced. So that's amazing. And this isn't coming from one book that somebody found. This is coming from all kinds of sources. These hagiographies are known. You can go look them up, but they will tell you that they are all fiction or heresy. But knowing what we know this is mind-blowingly true. And so let's take this first one out here. Following the darkness that covered the sun for 17 months, 536 to 537 AD, which that is known in history. You can look up that time where the sun went dark. Anyway, it says 7 brothers at the monastery underwent transformation while at prayer. So this is an account of 7, monks at a monastery undergoing glorified bodies, right? That's amazing. Their bodies, though remaining tangible, they still had physicality to them, emitted light comparable to bright lamps, requiring no candles. Also, they declared with one voice that this manifestation signified the beginning of the 1,000 years when Satan was bound. And so, over and over again in these hagiographies, pretty much they're saying that after the sun went dark for 17 months, that's when Satan was bound for 1,000 years. So that signified that happening. That is amazing. Now, this one gives us a glimpse into how the land changed after tribulation. The map shows lands now covered by the western seas that shall briefly emerge again when the millennium reaches completion. Most notably, the distance between Ireland and America is shown as merely 7-day sailing when these ancient roads reappear. The northern passage marked in red indicates the primary route by which the faithful shall journey to the sanctuary when the enemy is loosed. So this is talking about how the seas dried up, uncovering ancient roads that would facilitate the saints and all of these followers to get out of there before Satan comes back. So there's stories in here where entire kingdoms basically packed up and headed up north. So there was this, that's where a lot of people left. And so they knew exactly when Satan was going to be loosed again for the short season. And God and the saints and everybody made preparations for leaving. So there was a leaving of a large amount of people to the camp of the saints in the north, just like everybody's been saying. And now we have writings to kind of back this up. So that's amazing right there. I mean, is it not? In the year 580, according to the Roman calculation, numerous luminous beings were observed proceeding northward towards Germania, leaving traces of light where they walked. So these glorified saints, even when they walked, their footprints were lit up, just glorified. These neither angels nor ordinary men, but saints who had undergone the first resurrection. Their bodies transformed yet still visible, they established councils in the northern mountains where they mapped these patterns of stars and calculated precisely when the 1,000 years would reach completion. So, yeah, that's amazing. This talks about Jerusalem here, I believe, New Jerusalem. in northern Jerusalem stands at the point where celestial light, aurora, which has been going on a lot recently. We've got orbs with auras, and the aurora borealis is being seen way down past Texas where it normally isn't. So this is all the aurora stuff is ramping up in the news, and people are witnessing this a lot. Anyway, and its walls, constructed of crystal that captures and amplifies light, extended 33 cubits in height. 12 gates permit entry, just like it says in the Bible, each aligned with a stellar configurations marking the hours when transport between the worlds is possible. So this is all more amazing than we can really grasp right now. That's a pretty crazy hagiography here. Within dwells a community of the transformed faithful, governing terrestrial affairs during the millennium of Satan's bondage. So a lot of the saints were ruling from the camp in the north. So that's just another one kind of verifying that. That is just mind-blowing. A couple other humans I've got to tell y'all before I let you go. I'm trying to find it. Here's one. This is an account basically of saints being transported by chariots of light, which resembled the auroras. So that's wild. During the night of Epiphany 673 AD, 12 brothers from a monastery were transported by what witnesses describe as a chariot of light resembling the aurora. Their journey, according to accounts they later sent, took them to a city in the furthest north where the transformed saints maintained councils governing the millennial peace. And it says here on the last one, this direct bodily transport occurred with increasing frequency as the millennium progressed. So from what I understand, a lot of these earlier hagiographies were talked about, saints doing incredible stuff and battling evil. But towards the end of it, these hagiographies started concentrating on talking about how they were going to all leave and how everybody's going to, that are faithful, will go to the north. And so all of us have been saying that, well, where did everybody go or whatever? This happened. They all went up north to get out before Satan came, and seas dried up momentarily to reveal ancient roads where the faithful could walk and get there. It's amazing. Let's see. This one has to do with really strange creatures that were around in the millennial reign of Jesus, which is crazy, right? Because on maps you'll see all these just sea creatures and weird looking humanoids and stuff on all these old maps. To me, this verifies all that. During the 6th century, after the darkening of the sun, mariners routinely encountered creatures of extraordinary size in the northern waters, particularly snails with shells large enough to shelter several men, and luminous serpents that prophesied in human tongues. Most remarkable were the men of giant stature dwelling on the islands west of Thule, who claimed that their ancestors had walked directly from the eastern continent before the waters covered the ancient roads. So, there were luminous serpents prophesizing. So the world, not that long ago, was just miraculously. This was a totally different place. you had different creatures, and this is one of the most interesting ones to me, and I can't wait to read some more about that. So that has to do with creatures and even giants that evidently were around in the 1,000-year reign. So let's just do a couple more here. This is an interesting one. I have been thinking for a while now that, like, after tribulation happened, that the continents drifted. So, that Pangea, I was thinking that, it wasn't a million years ago. After the tribulation, the continents drifted apart. Well, this is kind of saying that the water level just changed. So maybe the continents didn't drift out like I thought, and maybe, just the waters receded. And all glory to God, He can do anything. So this says, according to ancient maps I was shown in the Roman repositories, the Western Ocean was not always as extensive as it now appears. The land, called Antilla and Brazil, were once connected to our continent by plains now submerged, which the ancients crossed on foot. So in our not too distant past, all the land masses were connected, basically, and which makes a lot of sense of a lot of different things. So, yes, that pretty much means that some of the Bible did happen in America, and some of it happened everywhere. You know what I'm saying? The world was easier to move around. Anyway, that's just fascinating. Another one there. And this one has to do, we were all saying and just kind of posturing that we think the Camp of the Saints was at the North Pole. And so this kind of verifies that. It even mentions the Black Rock. So the city at the Northern Pole, as described in the ancient something or other, stands upon the Black Rock, which draws all the compasses to itself. That Black Rock that they've hidden, or maybe it's not even visible right now, up in the north. It's on ancient maps, several different ancient maps. That's basically verifying that, and that there was a city there. Okay, so that's just amazing. Just talking about, I'm going to show one more. Okay, this is cool. This has to do with Antiquitech. Okay. The devices employed in the Northern Sanctuary utilize principles lost since antediluvian times. Primarily among these is the perpetual lamp, which draws energy from the Earth's magnetic currents through the lodestone, arranged in precise geometric patterns. According to the transformed ones who revealed these technologies, such devices powered their cities throughout the millennial reign, requiring no fuel or maintenance. So this may be one of the most interesting ones. Even your people looking into the mud flood in Tartaria, they, after looking at everything real closely, they realized that a lot of these buildings created free energy, basically. And some of that kind of sounded woo-woo to me, cymatic patterns and this and that. But this all seems to be how it works. All that stuff is real. And of course, there's the ability to draw energy from the Earth's magnetic currents. That's all been hidden from us. But everybody was right that was saying that. The cathedrals, all those places drew their own power and made their own power. And they had a lamp that they called it the perpetual lamp. And it's lodestone that was arranged in precise geometric patterns. So all that sacred geometry and stuff, all that is real. A new age commenced, which the wisest recognized as the millennial kingdom foretold by John. During this time, certain holy ones underwent transformation while still living, their bodies taking on qualities of the resurrection. These beings established council sites at points where the celestial energy touched Earth, particularly in the northern regions where aurora formed the bridges between worlds. And so when I read that, I think about how the auroras are active now. And reading through these, the time when the millennial reign was ending, they seem to indicate that the earth went through changes. Some of them say it was temporary changes. And so I think we're ending, and I think most of us agree, but in my opinion, we're at the end of this little season. You know, how long that's going to be, I don't know. But we're seeing lights in the sky and auroras and all this. The earth changes, volcanic activity. And so it is very similar, I guess, to what was going on in tribulation, because it sounds like, if you can believe and trust these writings here, that there's great earth changes, and those are reoccurring themes when the earth's about to change, or when a new age is about to begin. So, all right, here's another one. The city where glorified saints dwelled during their 1,000 years moves between physical and celestial realms according to the celestial cycles. When fully manifested on earth, it stands at the northern axis, surrounded by the mountains of crystal that capture aurora light. Those permitted entry describe structures built without joints or seams, halls that adjust their dimensions according to need. That is amazing and mind-blowing. And gardens yielding fruit, representing all knowledge from Adam to the present age. I'm not sure what that would exactly mean. Like, that'd be something to look into. That's interesting. More importantly, the city contains the archives recording all events of the millennium and calculations for recognizing signs of the enemy's release. That's pretty cool, because if I get to make it to the new heaven, I would like to go back and do some history. I want to know what happened. Since we've been so lied to, I would like to know the true history. And the only one I would truly trust is Jesus. So that'll be cool. Looking forward to that for sure. And the western waters, and will briefly emerge, allowing the final gathering of the faithful to the northern sanctuary. So over and over again in these writings, in these hagiographies, they state that they knew when Satan was going to be released. They calculated it, and provisions were made for large amounts of people to be able to go to the northern sanctuary. So that is pretty awesome. That's something to note. Ancient roads across what now are ocean floors will be revealed, marked by structures built by antediluvian giants. These, which according to this, that would mean there would be all kinds of structures made before the flood under the oceans. And I think most of us have seen lots of evidence of, structures on the floor of the oceans. These paths converge at the circular city where the black rock stands at Earth's northern axis, the last defense against Gog and Magog. Now, they're calling it a circular city And I always thought they would be in a cube or a pyramid shaped city. So I don't know if that's a red flag. Maybe I just don't know enough, but maybe this was just a circular city and it's not actually New Jerusalem. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's just the camp was a circular city. The camp of the saints was circular. Interesting nonetheless. This last one I just read, it is important to note, it's cited in one of John Dee's works. And John Dee wasn't very, you got to look him up. I don't know if he was such a good guy. He did a lot of Enochian magic and worked for the kings or something. So definitely take that one a grain of salt, but that doesn't mean he couldn't have cited something in one of his works that wasn't true. And it all goes along kind of what all these are saying anyway. Anyway, just interesting note, John Dee, this was a citation in one of his works, it looks like, and it's in the British Library. I'm going to read another one now. During the millennium, after the sun's darkness in 536 AD, numerous creatures believed extinct since the flood reappeared in remote regions. Most notable were amphibious serpents capable of human speech. And even though that sounds wild and crazy, I just somehow think that's true. I mean, you got all those creatures and stuff on the ancient maps we have, and I don't think those were just for decoration. Giant birds that transported the faithful to northern sanctuaries, that's crazy. They have lots of different modes of transportation. There's lots of bilocation accounts, instant teleportation accounts. There's accounts of saints riding in like chariots of light in the sky also, which is something that's very interesting. That's pretty crazy, though, that giant birds transported the faithful. That would be, imagine that, riding on a giant bird to the northern sanctuary. And marine creatures that built structures resembling temples. Marine creatures that built structures resembling the temples. That's awesome. Beneath shallow seas. The transformed saints explained that these beings served as guardians of the ancient knowledge during the 1,000 years of peace and would return to hidden realms when Satan is released, taking with them the technologies too powerful for the age of tribulation. So that's very interesting, because that's one thing I was thinking, well, I wonder what purpose these creatures would have served. Like, why would God have these antediluvian creatures where they were guarding ancient knowledge? So all this antediluvian technology, if these writings are correct, all this antediluvian technology wasn't meant to be in this age. Everything is as it should be, It's all according to his plan, and I trust it. So we're good. Okay, we got another one here. As the millennium of Satan's binding nears its completion, a lot of these do say in the 1500s. That's when most of these are claiming when Satan was actually released. But there were years leading up to this where there were floods and stuff, according to these writings. So that's probably where we got some of the mud floods. Stuff started deteriorating even before Satan was released. Things were Everything was expertly prepared in his grand plan, that God's going to wrap this all up with a nice bow and everything's going to be just perfect and we'll be in awe. The Council of the Transformed Saints has established protocols for the final gathering. 7 warning signs shall precede the enemy's release. Unusual celestial alignments, waters receding from certain coasts, mountains shifting positions, dormant volcanoes awakening, widespread aurora visible even in the southern regions. That's just happened recently. I'm in Texas, and some people could see the auroras in Texas, and that was not long ago, and that's just what I'm saying. These things seem to be coming back. And it seems to be the method of operation of when different ages are starting and ending. And dreams simultaneously experienced by the faithful worldwide. Certain animals migrating northward en masse. That's interesting to note about. They were having dreams simultaneously experienced by the faithful worldwide. That's interesting. Upon observing these signs, believers are instructed to follow specific routes marked by monuments erected throughout the millennium. I can just imagine them, it's all these large landmarks they were able to navigate and, know they're going through the right way, and leading to gathering points where the transformed ones will provide transportation to the northern sanctuary. Blessed are those that partake in the first resurrection, right? All right, so we got a few more here. During the millennium that commenced with the darkened sun, 536 AD, the transformed saints restored technologies preserved from antediluvian civilizations. Primary among these were devices generating limitless energy from elements found in ordinary stone, methods for neutralizing gravity through sound vibrations. That's been a theory for a while on how some of these buildings were built. Systems for communicating instantly across vast distances using crystalline networks. That's amazing. So they had telephones, sort of, but way better than what we got, and probably extremely safe communications, unlike what we have now. Mechanisms for purifying water and air through geometric arrangements of specific materials. These technologies sustained communities throughout the millennial peace, but were gradually withdrawn as 1,000 years approached completion, preserved only in the northern sanctuary for an age to follow Satan's brief release. So that's certainly very, very interesting. All right, so Michael's Chronicle preserves the earlier Syrian accounts describing how, after the darkened period ended, certain monasteries became centers of supernatural activity. At Mar Gabriel Monastery, monks recorded that their most devout brother, Abraham Aquardu, began to manifest the incorruptible body described by Paul, needing no food, emanating light, and instantaneously traveling to distant communities when they prayed for aid. The Chronicle records that similar transformations occurred throughout the Christian world, from Ireland to Ethiopia, always among the most devout. These transfigured ones gathered periodically at designated mountains, forming what contemporaries called the Kingdom Council. Their records, quoted extensively by Michael, explicitly calculated that Satan's binding began with the darkness and would last precisely 1,000 years before the brief season of liberty, when the dragon tests all nations. So that's in particular interest to me. It says precisely 1,000 years before a brief season of liberty. I'm sure y'all are all catching that. Most remarkably, these transformed saints established outposts in the far north, particularly in regions describing as beyond Thule, where they reportedly constructed a sanctuary city using technologies preserved before the flood. This city, circular with 12 radiating avenues, was described as particularly substantial and partly celestial, visibly only to those with purified perception. According to these preserved testimonies, this would serve as a gathering point for the faithful when the 1,000 years reach completion. So here, I think it's interesting to note that this hagiography says again that the city was circular. So maybe that's just the camp of the saints up there right now, and what I thought was interesting was it's visible to only those with purified perception. So maybe even if you went up there right now, not everybody would necessarily see the circular camp. So that's pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to do one more here. In the Winchester manuscript, additional entries describe the aftermath of these celestial events. According to these records, Columba and 12 companions underwent a transformation while praying, their bodies becoming luminous as the sun yet tangible as flesh. They announced together witnesses that prophesied the millennium has commenced with heaven's signs, and they established communities throughout the British Isles where they taught that for 1,000 years Satan is bound while the saints reign visibly. The Chronicle records that similar transformations occurred in Glastonbury and Canterbury, always among the individuals of exceptional holiness. These transfigured ones exhibited abilities considered impossible, including the power to calm storms, multiply food, and transport themselves instantly to locations hundreds of miles distant. Most significantly, the Peterborough continuation of the Chronicle records that these transformed saints established a network across Britain marked by standing stones inscribed with prophecies. These stones, some still existing, contain astronomical calculations predicting celestial alignments that would signal the end of the 1,000 years. And this one citing the end was around 1536 to 1540 AD. Now, what I would like to know is, can anybody find some standing stones inscribed with prophecies? It says some are still existing.
So to summarize, let me just say this. If you've watched this video up till this point, I need to ask you a question. Is the burden of proof on those who believe this biblical event already happened? Or is the burden of proof on those who don't believe? Let's see how many truth boxes we can check just from what has been presented in this video alone. I'll give you some examples. We have remnants of old world architecture still observable today, seemingly created with unknown technology that can only be explained by either supernatural or divine methods. Old coins, maps, and books that prove our timeline and geography of the world itself has been compromised. Ancient documents recently discovered that prove the existence of the resurrected saints, millennial reign, and short season. And one of the biggest pieces of evidence that a lot of people can't seem to get their head around is that we have statements made by the apostles and Jesus himself found in biblical scripture that discuss the millennial reign and the short season. And there are so many more. You know, I really do believe that there is just as much, if not more, evidence to back up this conspiracy as almost any other conspiracy theory that I can think of today.
How about Gog and Magog being covered up with a fake alien invasion? What's your thoughts on this subject? Yes, I absolutely, at this point, believe that that is the next thing we're waiting for in the little season. We're waiting for the little season to end, and like in Revelation chapter 20, it says that Satan gathers an army as numerous as the sands of the sea and goes after the camp of the saints, surrounds it, and then fire comes down from heaven. Why is it coming down from heaven? Which, by the way, I believe is a dragon. Because it's situated up in the sky, and it has been moving since the 1800s. They've been tracking it. And how are they tracking it? By telling us it's the magnetic north. All compasses point to Jesus. And the magnetic north is peculiar because it moves in different directions, and it increases and decreases its speed. And it seems to be that they've been tracking it since the 1800s, which is that kind of weird time with empty cities and mud floods, and the time that we think that the season began, which was in 1776. So it goes right on track with that. And then it starts to move away, right? Which makes sense. It's got to go hide itself from Satan. And it's moving towards Siberia. And that, I believe, is also fulfilling prophecy, where it says on the breadth, they surround him on the breadth of the earth, which is broad plain. And the largest, broadest plain is, you're correct, Gog and Magog, Siberia. Gog and Magog on old maps is in Siberia. And so during the Millennial Kingdom, we believe that heavenly New Jerusalem was visible to those on the earth, and that the saints and Jesus could go back and forth between the earth and between the beloved city. And there's paintings that show it in the background. It looks almost like an alien craft, and coins. I did a video which showed a coin, and it was clear as day, looks like a mothership. So that's moving along, and they know it's going to descend at the end of the little season, and everybody's not going to know what that is. But because we've been programmed through movies, and we've been programmed about aliens, many people believe that the earth is a spinning, wobbling space ball, and that aliens exist. So they're going to see that and be deceived. But what's interesting is that in Revelation 12, it's what they call a parallel chapter. So that actually matches Revelation 20. Those are two parallel chapters. And the dragon goes after the woman. And I know we're taught in church that the woman that has the crown with the 12 stars and is clothed in the moon and the sun. Well, that's not the church. I truly believe that that is heavenly New Jerusalem, because it's in between, right? It's clothed with the celestial bodies. And the dragon goes after it and spews water out of its mouth, and the earth swallows it up. And that sounds a lot like the mud floods, doesn't it? Anyways, I hope that answered your question. Yes, I think that is on the horizon. Oh, and I also want to mention that Gordy Rose talked about this in a weird talk. He's the founder of D-Wave Quantum Computers, stating that they are basically summoning an AI army to go against a mothership threat that will come, and it's going to, I forget the year that he said it was, but he was very specific, and it was either like 2027 or 2030 when you added the years up. So very bizarre. And the robots that are the army robots are called MK Phantom Ultra and Adam. Like, hello. It's totally weird. And what I also find interesting is that all our technology is powered by quartz. Quartz is sand. Satan's gathering an army as numerous as the sands of the sea.